Laing Middle School of Science and Technology is the #1 STEM school in the United States. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down with Dr. Mel Goodwin, the STEM coach for Laing. Dr. Mel, it is so good to see you.
Thank you for being here.
I really appreciate this.
Well, we're looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. In fact, we're sitting here at Laing Middle School in Mount Pleasant, and I want to read to you the headline from the Moochie News. It says this: #1 STEM school in the nation. It's more than just a title for Laing Middle School. So what is it?
It is a challenge. It's great to be #1 in anything, especially #1 in the nation, but we do not think that means we have arrived. We understand that the reason that we are the #1 middle school is because we have an idea about where we're going, we have a good idea about how to get there, and we've actually made a little bit of progress on the way. But it doesn't mean that we have reached the final destination by any stretch of the imagination.
So as we sit here right now, what is that idea in your mind?
What we're trying to do is to create a public education system, or I should say more accurately, modify our existing system so that it really meets all of the needs of our 21st century students. And what that means is we definitely have to master some academic content. The tests and the lessons are still there, but in the 21st century that's really not enough. One of the reasons is that human knowledge doubles about every 5 years. So the amount of stuff there is to know doubles every 5 years.
Right.
So the idea that we're going to teach our students everything they need to know 6, 7, 8, 9 years from now is really kind of crazy.
Wow.
Because a lot of that knowledge doesn't even exist yet.
Wow.
So that's one issue. Another issue is that many employers are telling us that we shouldn't be focusing quite so much on stuff. I mean, they say, we'll teach them the stuff, but we need students that understand how to learn. They know how to work in groups. They know how to solve problems. They know how to think critically about problems.
Right.
So those are the things that some of us call soft skills. And it's not part of our curriculum, but it's really, really important to students being successful in 21st century careers.
You're right about that.
And then we have the third piece, and that is what we call technological literacy. That we are surrounded by the products of engineering and technology.
Right.
And unfortunately, most people don't have a clue about how most of it works. So we can't really consider people to be literate if they don't understand most of what's around them. So what we need to do is to expose our students to what modern technology is, what it includes, what things they might do with it. And it's not so much that we're going to teach them to be little mini engineers, but we're going to teach them what some of the tools are that they may use. And they may not use it right away, but at least they'll have an idea that it exists. So that's what we are trying to do here.
You talk about tools. Crazy question. What tools are you using to help those students get to that next level?
Well, some of them are mental tools. Some of them are tools that come out of science, especially neurobiology, where people have discovered a whole lot more about how the brain works when we're learning well, what things we can do to make learning more effective,
Right.
Make it stick longer.
Right.
We're also talking about physical tools, things like 3D printers and laser cutters
Right.
and microcontrollers. And these are things that are very accessible to students, and they can use them to create different kinds of representations of their own learning and to help other people learn. So we have students, for example, that are using computers to make their own apps to teach a subject, so that when they are studying something like world geography,
Right.
they may be creating in a class 20 different apps that will cover part of that content. And then they can share those apps around, and so every student has lots of different ways to learn that subject matter, rather than just listening to the teacher day after day.
Yeah, that gets boring for some people.
It gets boring for most people pretty quickly.
It does. It does indeed. I told you as we were walking up to this interview that I was in middle school almost 20 years ago. I left high school in 2004. As you know, education in South Carolina is a very critical issue right now. What is the state of education in your mind?
The state of education is that it's, as you pointed out, tremendously challenging. On the one hand, we have all sorts of state and federal mandates that say you have to perform at a particular level on a particular kind of test,
right.
and that kind of performance is really important to students in terms of where they go for higher education. It's important to teachers in terms of how well they're evaluated as teachers.
Right.
But at the same time, there are these other things that students need to be learning. And the question is, how do we put those together? How do we ensure that the students, our students, really have the skill set that they need to succeed, and at the same time are able to do these other things, perform on these tests
right.
that are really critically important to students and the teachers. And our education system hasn't really caught up to that reality yet. It's not that people don't know that it's there,
Right.
but it's a big system, and big systems are slow to change.
Yeah.
And one thing about change in the 21st century is that it's not slow at all. It happens fast.
Fast, very fast.
So that's our challenge. How do we keep up with that pace of change, and at the same time deliver all of these things that our students need?
I mean, you know, also when we were talking in the hallway, I know that you're actually trying to basically create a meeting between Governor McMaster and Senator Tim Scott and a couple other leaders. If you were to sit down with them one-on-one, what would be your first question to them?
My first question would be, how would you like to see South Carolina progress in the next 5 years? That right now, we're not particularly highly regarded in terms of public education, and I don't think that's necessarily an individual fault.
Okay.
I think it's a matter of understanding opportunities, understanding a lot of different things. And South Carolina has a tremendous opportunity. We have, on the one hand, a huge economic investment from outside. We have companies like Boeing and Bosch and BMW that want to be here and that are investing in South Carolina, and they want to invest in our workforce. And at the same time, we have an education system that is really not based on the 21st century reality, but we can change that, and we know we can change that, and it's not a difficult thing to do. It's more a matter of looking at the problem a little differently and taking the resources we have and making the most of those.
So again, here we are at Laing Middle School in Mount Pleasant, and you know, a lot of people that I interview know who they are when I interview them. But can you describe Dr. Mel Goodwin to me?
Dr. Mel is a guy who is trained as a marine biologist, who spent about 15 years working as a marine biologist in the Eastern Caribbean, living the dream, doing all that stuff, swimming with the fish, diving with the dolphins. And at one point, I started working with NOAA, and they have a program called the Ocean Exploration Program, and I was working with them to develop lessons about ocean exploration and about new discoveries and all that there is to be learned in the ocean. And at one point I was on one of the ships and talking with a gentleman who runs their underwater robotics program. And he said, you know, Mel, we got a real problem. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, I get all of these kids that come to me and they want to work with me, and they got great grades and they've been to great schools and it all looks fine until I ask them to bring me a crescent wrench and they don't know what I'm talking about. And he said, our problem is we have got to get kids having hands-on experiences with something other than keyboards, because they don't understand how the rest of the world works.
Right.
And I thought, here I am writing these lessons that are supposed to sort of interest people in the oceans and in science.
Right.
And there's a lot that we're not doing. And so I thought at that point, well, maybe it's time that we focus more on those other skills and bring that into the formal curriculum. And so I ended up talking with a few people in South Carolina and ended up talking with people at Laing who are ready to make a change, and here we are.
Wow. Write the headline for me. Laing Middle and STEM will be in 5 years.
A model for 21st century public education.
Wow, amazing. Well, Dr. Mel Goodwin, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Well, thank you for being here.
Anytime.